have the privilege today of speaking to my friend Bobby. Bobby, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get to know a little bit more about you and your story. And honestly, I'm going to tell myself this right now. We're just going to have a good time together. I really want our viewers to know that we are going to be discussing relapse.
Okay.
Um, we are going to be discussing your relapse. We're going to be discussing that there's beauty in relapse. I don't think people usually would put the word beauty behind relapse, but relapse is a part of the recovery process.
Yes.
And I want to just shed light on that. So if there are individuals, if there are husbands and wives, mothers and fathers that are struggling with a loved one that's currently in a relapse, or they had years and years of sobriety and they're not walking in that now, I want them to know that it's part of the process, right?
It is, unfortunately. But it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a bad thing.
It doesn't have to be a bad thing. And I can tell you firsthand that I met my husband sober and he relapsed in our marriage. And at the time, it was just probably the worst thing that's ever happened. But in retrospect, it was so necessary because there's other things that my husband needed to work out, you know. Um,
Mhm.
he used to even say when he was sober, like, maybe I envision myself drinking when I'm older. And I used to kind of like freeze up a little bit when he'd say that because I was like, I just don't know if he knows quite yet that he doesn't have control over even alcohol. Um, so,
Right.
yeah, we'll
That's one
discuss
of
that.
the lies. That's one of the lies that we tell ourselves.
Mhm.
Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can have just a little bit. It's been a really long time, and maybe I can have just one drink or one or two drinks. And it's never true.
Right. It's not. I know for my husband's walk, and I know from the little bit that I know of your story, and we're going to let our viewers into a little bit more of that story. And I'm anxious to hear about that. That for him and for yourself, there has to be a black and white. There has to be a black and white when it comes to your recovery.
Yes.
Yeah.
It
So I would love to go into just your childhood because addiction does not discriminate. We know this. And I just want everyone to get to know like who Bobby is. And I think in order to do that, we're going to have to just like take a cold plunge right now. So let's go.
okay.
Let's go. Let's get there. Tell me a little bit about about your childhood and yeah, what that looked like. Was it happy? Was it sad? You know?
It was rough. Um, I have addiction and alcoholism on both sides of my family, dating way back multiple generations that I'm aware of. And like my mom would have a couple beers with a football game or a baseball game. She's a big Cubs fan. And she always looked like she was having a good time. She would have maybe one every so often, one beer every so often. I never really saw my dad drink. Um, it was just one of those things that was kind of it was there every once in a while. It was no big thing. Nobody made a big deal of it. I didn't know what alcoholism was because I never really saw how it affected people, at least when I was a kid. Um, but growing up, my dad was an ordained minister,
Oh,
and not working as a minister, but he went through seminary college. He graduated. They actually met at a Christian college here in town. And early on, um, it was a very abusive uh, way of growing up. Um, there was a lot of physical abuse, there was a lot of violence, there was sexual abuse, and it wasn't. I started spending a lot of time away from the house because my parents were always fighting. Um, it just wasn't a good place to be.
Mhm.
And as I started getting into my teenage years, I saw we were going to church, and as soon as church was over, the abuse started. And I saw a lot of my friends in the youth group. They would show up to school on Monday with bruises, and there was a lot of it going on. Um, and so for a long time, as soon as I could, I got away from the church, and I never lost my faith in God. That's never gone away. But it took a long time before I was able to separate this is what that version of the church is versus this is what God says. Two totally different things. And once I was able to separate the two, then I was like, okay, I'm cool with God. You know, it's
Yeah.
I'm I never lost my faith. It was just once people get involved, things get a little bit twisted sometimes. But so that was me growing up. It was I remember when I was in first grade, the movie Star Wars came out. And I was at school. We weren't allowed because of the religious stuff, we weren't allowed to watch anything with violence. We weren't allowed to listen to rock and roll, the Beatles, Elvis, that was all bad stuff. And so I went to school one morning and was playing in the sandbox, and all the kids were talking about this movie, Star Wars. And they were reenacting it on the playground, all the fight scenes. And I was sitting on a swing and I had no idea what they were talking about. And I just felt completely different and isolated. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one that hadn't gotten to see it that weekend, but it felt like it.
Mhm.
And I think that was the first time that I ever really felt different.
Gosh, I'm going to pause right now because I actually was not the one that was supposed to interview you. It was going to be my husband because he's on the sober side. And it's interesting because we tend to separate, the family side, sober side, yet we need to heal alongside of one another. And
Yes.
I think maybe just in speaking with you, I came to this like realization is that, you know, I too had a lot of religious, spiritual abuse in my past. I don't think that you even are privy to that. We're friends outside of this, but
Mhm.
there was a lot of that in my life. I was raised in a cult. My mom invited that in with her second marriage. And I just, we're not supposed to cry yet, nor get teary eyed or emotional. I think there's a rule in this book here of this is not how it's supposed to go down. But the fact that you just told me that, you never lost your faith, you never lost your faith in God despite man, and despite hypocrisy, despite things that are supposed to be good that are taken for just that are evil, right?
Yeah.
Um, I would say is why you're still here, you know, because in the quietness of probably your weakest, loneliest day, you didn't lose your faith. And
I didn't. It was almost like my form of rebellion early on. Um, I'm gonna believe in spite of you,
yeah,
that kind of thing.
that's pretty gangster, Bobby. Because honestly, I think most people that I hear, you know, especially when there's such heartache, um, they get mad at God, you know, they get mad or they just decide to go the other way. And um, I too never lost that, you know, I was able to discern like what was going on in my home, even though it was under this spiritual guidance and practice.
Right.
It wasn't like the father that I know, you know, in the quietness.
No, it went completely against what I was reading
Yeah.
in the Bible. You know, my God is a God of love and forgiveness, and he worked with the lowest of the low, with the fishermen and the prostitutes, and he was comfortable with them. He wasn't all about the rich and the powerful and the good looking.
Yeah.
Those were the people that he didn't really talk to much.
I just there's a song, and I know it's a biblical reference in that the last becomes first. You know, like on Earth,
Hmm.
um, we have this like, oh, the doctors and the well, I'm not trying to bash doctors. Sorry, doctors, if you're watching this, but I'm just saying like the drug addict, you know, or like you said, the prostitute, that woman that's just out there doing all her things. There's this beauty of like when you fully surrender, you know. Yeah, the last become first. And I'd love to pause and just recognize that, Bobby, your story, the last becoming first, is so powerful. And that is the heartbeat of RSSN. That is the heartbeat of why we're doing what we're doing. That's the heartbeat of like what I want everyone to know is that our coaches are are walking models because of their testimony. And I know that you're here to help, and I know that you're here and you're going to help a lot of people. And we're just in the beginning. We haven't even got the juicy part, right? But I also I heard when you were speaking about how addiction runs in your family. It does in mine as well. But when you mentioned your father and your mother, you just saw them drink a little bit. The acts of abuse, and we're not going to get in detail by any means, but were they quietly addicts? Were they quietly hiding that? Or is that, or you don't know?
As an adult, I look back at my real dad and I see a lot of addict behavior.
Mhm.
He just didn't use.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that behavior is also generational because I know that his parents were very abusive to him. Um, so I'm not sure what the full story was, but I never really saw him abuse. I never saw him use drugs. I never saw him abuse alcohol.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not sure who the pipe that I found, I'm not sure which mom or dad that belonged to. I was very young and knew that it smelled funny,
Mhm. Yeah.
but I never saw him use anything.
Um, okay. So you had mentioned Star Wars, right? Was it Star Wars?
Star
Okay.
Wars.
Okay. So let's go to Star Wars really fast. So you were feeling isolated, sandbox. Whoa, that what the heck? I'm alone. Knowing that, like in hindsight, it's like that wasn't gonna like totally wreck you, but it's something that you have carried on with you until this now. I mean, there's things that
Right.
kids said to me that I still hold on to, but if you put yourself back in that little boy, um, and you recall feeling like kind of an outcast, if you will, I think it's a great place to now kind of ask you, like, where did your drug use begin? You know, were you, yeah, where did it start for you, Bobby?
So I remember there was always the beer sitting in the garage. It was not refrigerated, it was warm. And I don't remember if somebody was talking about it, one of my friends, or how it started, but I remember my parents weren't home, my sister was, and I decided I wanted to know what it tasted like.
Normal.
And yeah, I'm sure it was, but I'm pretty sure it was beer that was way expired, and that's why it was still sitting in the garage untouched. Because when I first opened it, it was the most foul smell that I could ever imagine,
Yeah.
but I still wanted to try it. And I took a sip and I threw it up, and I took another sip and I threw it up. And finally, I choked back, I don't know, maybe half of the can. And I was starting to feel the effects, but it was disgusting.
Yeah.
It was completely disgusting. And I had a sponsor point out one time, well, then you were already an addict at that point because you kept going, even knowing how disgusting it was.
Oh.
And he was right. I think I had the addictive behavior from the get go. Um, I didn't drink addictively for a lot of years. Well, a few years. But still, I remember that feeling, that sensation of being drunk for the first time.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things where years later, I was still trying to catch that first buzz again. Um, I think it wasn't until I was middle of high school, I was probably 16 years old, when I started drinking a lot. It was just on weekends. It wasn't interfering with school or work or anything like that. But it was enough where my mom, when I would come home at night, if I was even a little bit late, she would wait by the door and give me that breathalyzer kiss
Yeah.
and just smell my breath. And she would know immediately that I had been drinking.
Mhm.
And it got to the point where I had missed curfew so often that finally she was just done and started locking the door. And if I wanted to sleep at the house, I was sleeping in the garage. And I continued that behavior of just not coming home, not calling. I would show up whenever. And she finally got sick of it. And one day she called me. I was at my girlfriend's house. And she said, "You'd better come pick up your stuff. It's in the front yard. You need to come pick it up before somebody else does." So it was a mad scramble. I think I was 16. It was a mad scramble to go get my stuff. And I ended up finishing high school living at my girlfriend's house.
Wow. Wow, that's really hard to hear, and I'm sure it was hard for your mom too. We hear a lot of that on the family support side, like when you're dealing with a minor, you know, and it's like you have this sense of like, okay, I'm mom, and he's still a minor. Like, what am I supposed to do and not condone it? Do I condone it? You know, it's there's just so many emotions, and there's really not a right answer. So your mom said, no more, this is my boundary, and you decided, okay, mom, I'm out, and you lived with your girlfriend, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
It was basically she was showing me tough love
Yeah.
and she labeled it as tough love. Um, and she had given me lots of opportunities to change my behavior, a ton of opportunities to stop what I was doing. And she had told me what the consequences would be before it happened. And I chose to continue drinking in spite of what she had said. By that time, I was smoking weed and just my grades were going downhill. Um, my life was a mess already.
Yeah. Do you
Uh,
feel like you said choice. Do you feel like you were still in a place where you could choose to use or not, or do you feel like it was more of a have to, like where your full blown like addiction went?
no, it was still a choice.
Yeah.
Um, I could have put it down and walked away. I wasn't physically addicted to it. It was just, I was having fun. It was what the other kids were doing. At my girlfriend's house, it was all over the place. Her mom was a partner in a bar downtown. And so we ended up hanging out at the bar a lot. And that was where I first uh, saw people using cocaine and some other stuff. Um, Fortunately, that stuff, as much as I tried to use it, it doesn't work for me. Like it just has no effect on me. And I don't even know how much money I wasted trying to make it work. But
Oh
in
man.
the end, I just always went back to alcohol. It was always around. I could walk into the liquor store down the street and I could always get it. Um, so it was always my go-to.
Yeah, you brought up a point too, in regards to everyone was doing it, and I think that I have four sons, and I never would want to slap a label on any of my kids saying that they're predisposed. However, with addiction, um, you know, there's a lot that's passed down. It's a generational chain bond, you name it, it can be passed down. And it's hard, I think, in our culture now because, you go to college and it's party, 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 or you're a top dog, executive party, 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 party. And you see everyone else being able to drink alcohol and then show up for their job at 5:30 in the morning, and you're just like, what's wrong with me? And I don't have that gene. My clicker can click on and off, but um, I've had some really in depth conversations with other parents, when their child is like, I drink and I am depressed and I can't wake up and I can't go to school and I can't have a job. And it's like, shoot, dang, that's where there is such a difference with, an addict and a normie, if you will. Right. And so it sounds like you were like, okay, kind of starting to kind of compare, like everyone else is doing it. I can do this. Right.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
um, where, like, we can just kind of fast forward this a little bit because I really want to get into the golden nugget here. But where was like your downfall? Where were you like, I can't keep living like this anymore?
So I started, I had there was a girl that I was dating just after high school, like right at the end of high school, and her dad worked in a country club and they had an opening for a bartender.
Oh, great. Oh,
And
there you
yeah.
go. Roll.
So I started bartending. I was the envy of all my friends because was around alcohol. I got paid to serve alcohol. I thought life was really good.
Mm.
I was making a ton of money. I dropped out of school, dropped out of college. After 2 or 3 years or so, I dropped out. And people started talking to me about there's something wrong. I'm showing up for work. I totally reek of alcohol. I've got the shakes uh, from first thing in the morning. And I was kind of able to explain away why I smelled like alcohol. Well, I spilled a drink on myself when I was serving such and such. But it didn't take very long before that didn't fly anymore.
Mhm.
And I started getting fired. Well, I got fired from there, and then I got fired from the next bartending job, and I started working biker bars, and just a long line of worse and worse type places that I was working at, and being fired from them
Yeah.
for being an alcoholic, but nobody labeled it as an alcoholic. Um, there was a big stigma around the word. This was in the late 80s, early 90s, and it wasn't really discussed in public.
Yeah. It's pretty hush
At
hush.
least very much.
Yeah.
So I ended up I think I was 20 or 21 when I became homeless for the first time.
Oh.
And I was running around with a guy that I had worked with that also was in the same boat. He was homeless. And one day he says, "Hey, I've got this friend that will let us stay at his place, crash on the couch." So we moved into his house. Um, but the guy had one rule where as long as we were staying there, we had to go to a meeting with him in the
To an
evening,
AA meeting?
an AA meeting. I had no idea what the meeting was about. He just said, "You have to go to a meeting with me every night." Because
You're like,
he was in recovery. He was trying to get his kids back. Um, so that was his condition. And I said, okay. And my buddy wasn't okay with that. And he went and hung himself.
oh,
And he was about 21,
oh,
same as me.
oh.
And so I I woke up one morning. This guy had a baby pot-bellied pig. And I woke up one morning, it was cold, and I had rolled up in the rug on his floor. I was like kind of drinking, but kind of not, trying to keep away the detox. I was going to meetings with him every night, and then after the meeting, my commitment was to stay sober, to get to the meeting sober.
Okay.
And then after the meeting, I would
Baby
go,
steps.
yeah.
Have you seen that
Um,
movie, What About Bob?
I love that movie.
Oh, okay. Baby steps.
Yeah,
Okay.
baby
Keep
steps.
going. Baby steps.
So I committed to going to the meetings. I was going sober, and then as soon as the meeting was over, I would hit the liquor store.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Um, but during the day, I wasn't drinking, which was tough.
Mhm.
But this one morning, I woke up and I was in this rug rolled up in it, and his baby pot-bellied pig had at some point during the night crept into my arms, and I woke up and this stupid pig was laying in my arms grunting at me because she had to go outside. And that was when I realized that normal people don't do this.
They're not rolled up in a rug like with a potbelly pig.
Yeah. Um
Oh,
and so that was kind of my realization that I've really sunk pretty low, and alcohol has something to do with it. And maybe these weirdos at these meetings might have the answer, because I see the same people all the time, and they're driving cars instead of jumping on the bus, and they know each other and they talk to each other, and when they get to the meeting, they have a cup of coffee and it's not shaking.
Yeah.
Like, they can hold it with one hand and take a sip without getting it all over themselves, which at the time I couldn't do. I had to
Uh,
use both hands and it was still shaking.
yeah.
So that was, I think, 1992 was when I first went into a meeting.
So you like saw yourself in the mirror and you're like, okay, this is where I'm at. And that's the thing. It's like in the family support meetings, all we can do is get ourselves strong, provide an open door for recovery, but ultimately you have to want it. And like that's the thing. Like all we can do is just be there, right? Just be there
Yes.
until you have your rolled up in a rug with holding a pig, can't take coffee kind of moment, right? I
Right.
mean, okay, so
Other
you got
people were other people were telling me, "Hey, you've got to get sober. You've got to stop drinking." I was like, "You don't know what you're talking about." They were pushing it on me. Um my mom, the few times that I was talking to her, because by then I had started talking to her, trying to talk her into helping me out, and she wasn't. It was still all about tough love. So there would be months where I wouldn't talk to her or my sister. I was mad at them. But every time I talked to them, they were talking about, you've got to stop drinking.
Mhm.
And I wasn't ready. No
Mhm.
matter how much they pushed or no matter what they said, I didn't want it for myself, because I wasn't quite convinced that that would solve my problems.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me just ask you a question. Like in those conversations, when you're like your mom and your sister, like how much they love you, would you have changed anything that they would have said, or it's just like make note, people, like you could say all those things, but again, I just wasn't, you're just not ready. I mean, is there something else that you desired from that conversation, or was it just like they were speaking from love to you about seeking help, but you just weren't ready? I mean, you just weren't
In
ready.
a nutshell, I was not ready, and it wouldn't have mattered what they had said differently. I wasn't ready to get help.
Yeah.
I wasn't I wasn't listening to the help that was being offered. Um I wasn't done drinking, and I think I needed to be convinced for myself that this is how I'm going to die.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what they said. They did all the right things. They didn't enable me to do anything. They kept me at arm's length. They kept me out of the house for their own protection. But having talked to my mom about it a few years ago, um, she got some advice from a friend early on, that and he told her, if you let him fall and hit his rock bottom, you're doing him a favor. Because if she had continued to help me, I wouldn't have hit my rock bottom so soon. It would have
Oh
been
man, I wish we
prolonged.
could. I think we should like play that over and over and over and over in this podcast, because I think coming from your mouth to someone like me, it's so powerful. Like again, you had to hit your rock bottom and they did not enable you. They loved you, like you said. You knew that they loved you. And now, in retrospect, in hindsight, they loved you so much that they were trusting and giving you the dignity of like, you knew you weren't your best version of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they loved me enough to let me fall
Yeah.
on my own. Um,
Ah,
which had to be one of the more painful things that they went through.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, they could have given me money or a place to stay or any of that, and that would have been helpful in the moment, but it would not have helped me or my situation long term.
That's super powerful.
It took me a lot of years to get over that
Yeah.
and to get back to having a good conversation with my mom and my sister. I was angry at them for a really long time because being on the receiving end of it, you don't I didn't understand why they were doing what they were doing. It felt like they hated me.
Yeah.
Um I felt like a total failure in myself, not from anything that they were saying, but it just sort of emphasized that there was something wrong
Yeah.
with me. And they
Um,
didn't want me around at the time.
I know, but
And that
like
was
we need more of your moms and more of your sisters, I tell you, especially on this family
yeah,
support side. Because I speak a lot about this, but how love can look so differently in addiction. Love looks different. Love looks like saying, sorry, I'm not giving you money, and sorry, you can't come in the home. But that was like the ultimate sacrifice of love that they had to do for you. And yeah, I would say, and I vouch for that, no doubt that's the hardest thing. And easier said than done. I mean, I'm a mom and I'm still trying to figure out what all my kids are going to do, like for their jobs. And it's like, no, Jill, no, I have to
that's
let
not your
them.
job.
No, it's
Yeah.
hard though. It's really, really hard, really hard. But
I see my sister now with her son. He's a year younger than Gavin.
yeah,
They were at school together.
yeah, that's right.
Um and I see my sister letting him make his own mistakes, and he gets to fall on his face every once in a while, and she's always there to comfort him and to pick him up, but she grew up in the same household that I did, and so it's all about, well, I can tell you what you should do, but you're going to do what you want to do anyways.
Yeah,
Just know that I'm here for you.
totally. Totally. And that's, I mean, I am a praying mom. So if my kids have to go down some rocky road, I always say, like, Lord, just smack them fast, keep them safe. Right.
Oh yeah.
But like, they all have to feel their consequence because we're
Yes.
human and I'm no different. I need to like do it to see, like, is this right? How's this feel? I did when I was younger too, but okay, we could probably talk for 5 hours, no doubt. So I kind of want to get into like, I know that you had a really long stint of sobriety.
Mhm.
And then I know that you relapsed. And I guess my question to you is that long stint of sobriety, did you fall in love with your recovery? Or was there still a little clicker going, maybe I can, like we were talking about earlier? I just,
Right.
yeah, I kind of, can I go there? Is that an okay question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing's off limits.
Oh, don't say
Um,
that.
so I did have multiple years in sobriety, and I did that multiple times. I was sober through most of my marriage. I was married for 11 years.
I did not know that.
And yeah, I was sober for 8 years while I was married. I met her in sobriety, and it wasn't until the last few years, my I started drinking again. I'm not sure why. One day I made a decision that I was just done with whatever and I was over it. And it didn't take long before it was a daily thing.
Yeah.
Um, I started calling in sick to work. I had a good job. I was paying the bills. I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. I was just also drinking.
Mhm.
And I figured at the time that since I was doing everything that I needed to be doing, why not?
Right.
But then it became I was calling in sick to work so that I could stay home and drink. And I was drinking every day and I was drinking during the day. And of course, my wife uh, wasn't into that. She had a problem with it, of course.
Yeah.
Um, and so we started having problems. And after about 3 years, I moved out. We got a divorce. Um, and I found a sober living to move into down in Los Angeles. And again, I had a few years. I think I had 4 years of sobriety after that. Um, Met somebody, fell in love, and then I lost her to cirrhosis of the liver.
Oof.
And that was about a week before, I was 8 days before I moved into my last sober living.
Okay. Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I came in just totally insane and wanting to argue with everybody. Um, Thought that I knew better because I had had sobriety before. I just had a fall. I lost my best friend,
Mhm.
and I thought that I was entitled to being miserable and being a very ugly version of myself.
Yeah.
Um, I went in very arrogant, even though I had spent the last 4 or 5 weeks of her life sleeping in my car, homeless, had nothing to be arrogant about, but it was kind of a defense mechanism. I didn't want anybody to see how much I was hurting. So I got into this structured sober living for guys, and it was all about changing, not only staying sober, but changing the parts of me that were defective.
Mhm.
One of the steps talks about God, take away all my defects of character. And it's the defects of character combined with some really poor decisions that make me drink and relapse. And so this men's sober living was all about let's fix the defects of character. And along the way, we get sobriety. So I was there for 3.5 years before I relapsed again. Um, I had some resentments that I wasn't dealing with, and I was isolating and not talking to people. I was surrounded by sobriety, but I was avoiding everybody
Mhm.
and just not doing the right thing. When I was at my happiest, I was giving back, I was being helpful. I was giving my all at work, giving my all to sobriety. I knew that being sober is what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I knew, having been there before, how much better my life is when I'm sober.
And I'm going to stop you right there because I think it's really important to point out because in the beginning I really wanted to go into relapse. And you have drawn so much from every relapse because you go, oh no, not my best version. oh, not that guy, not my best version. And yeah, there's a multitude of relapses, just as like when you really speak to people that have a just they live this life of recovery, there has been a lot of relapses, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know a lot of people that haven't had one. And so I kind of wanted to just make sure we really like shine our big spotlight on that this is part of the process. And for
It is.
you to just take golden nuggets from every stint that you had of sobriety that has led you to where you are today is invaluable, as hard as that is on your family members, as hard as it is on your friends that care about you that are in recovery.
Each relapse has taught me a lot.
Yeah.
Um, it's that failure that failure is a big teacher.
Yeah, I wish it wasn't,
Um,
but it is. Gosh.
well, that's how I learn the best,
Yeah.
is by failing. And I get up and I try it again, and sometimes I fail and sometimes I figure it out, and sometimes there's somebody going, "Hey, there's a better way."
Yeah, I think something that you'd mentioned too with where you are now is I just lost my train of thought because I do that. Oh gosh, what was I gonna say? What was I gonna say? Hold on. I'm sorry.
No
I
worries.
spaced. I totally spaced. It's fine. Scott's gonna
Pause.
edit that. Pause. We're pausing. What were we talking about? Gosh, because it was something about
Failing and learning from.
oh, yeah. No, okay. It's about how no, I just lost it again. Oh my gosh. I need coffee. Hold on. Hold on. I need a double shot coffee over here. Yes, when you had recovery and you had a relapse, you would again go in like, no, you don't know what you're talking about, because I had recovery then, and how it's so
Yeah.
important to remain, humble. And I know, like, for my husband, with his relapse, he took it really seriously. Some family members would say, like, oh no, he still has this many years. But it's like, yeah, no, yeah, no, like I had to start over. I had a hard redo because this is my sober date now. And that involves, like, yeah, again, such humility, in that process, because I too would like to piece together all of the years, that are awesome. But no, it's like we have to just start over and redos, and how important it is with people watching us to just stay in that place of humility and asking for forgiveness. Because I know as a mom, I make mistakes all the time, but I'm pretty dang quick because I'm around such incredible individuals that soak and marinate in their humility. To ask for forgiveness pretty quickly, even though I'm mom, I'm mom and I should
Right.
know the best. It's so important to stay there, whether you're in recovery or you're not, right? And also you led on the um, you touched on giving back. Like we're these human beings and we're designed really to give. I'll interject really fast with myself is that my husband needs to stay in his recovery every day.
Mhm.
It's so important to him. He's just one of
It
those
is.
cases. Yeah.
Well, I think for me, this is part of giving back. It's something that keeps it in the forefront of my mind that I am an addict, I am an alcoholic, and I do need to work on it every day. And it's working with other people and talking to other people that really keeps it fresh. We get to have a different perspective. I grew up one way, but somebody else grew up a different way. They're coming at this from different eyes. And there are a lot of times where somebody will say something or ask a question in a way that makes me really think, where I wasn't thinking about it that way.
Yeah.
And it keeps it fresh. It keeps me thinking. And it really keeps me motivated. I There's a saying, give it away to get it back. And in order to give it away, I need to actually be practicing it. It's something that we have to practice every single day, the same way that I drank and used every day.
Right. Right. And just for individuals that are listening to our podcast, we on the sober support side, there are 5 meetings a day. They're all Zoom, and so when you're speaking about just getting other people's feedback, it's so special. Like when you are when you're facilitating the meeting, Bobby, and you have your topic, and then just for other people to pour into what that topic is. There's IOPs joining, there's sober living homes joining, and it's pretty incredible to watch when I see my husband on it. And just it's so nice to know that he has his recovery in his pocket wherever he is, if we're on vacation. But I love that your story is, um, we hear a lot of stories in the recovery world, and everyone has, quote unquote war story, but they're different. They are different. We're not all the
They
same.
are.
How we hit our bottom. Some people don't even have to hit their bottom. I don't know who those people are, but I've heard stories where they're like, yeah, just one day I woke up and decided I'm done living this way. And I'm like, good for you. That seems easy. But it's so nice to hear a little bit of your story. And I know that there's so much more to be told, but I think it's incredible to just give our audience a little sprinkle of who Bobby is and who you are today, and the man um, that you're walking out with, the man that you are. It's beautiful. And I'm so blessed to call you my friend. And I hope that we can do this again.
I do too. I
I
really
think,
appreciate the opportunity that RSSN has given me.
yeah,
Um, it's super special to be able to. It's incredibly important to me to be able to stay connected no matter where I am.
yeah.
I know I was in one of the meetings and one of the coaches was leading a meeting in a field surrounded with snow, throwing the ball for his dog. It was just, I mean, it was the most gorgeous scenery, but it's remote sober support.
Yeah.
We get to do it from wherever we're at. We get to log in from wherever, on our lunch break, sitting in the truck, wherever.
Yeah, you can show up. You can show up however you want. All right. Well, it's been really special. It's been really special to talk to you, and I look forward to seeing you again. But I definitely will see you in one of our meetings.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me, Jill.
Yeah. Thanks, Bobby.
Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye. Okay. Bye.
Bye.